Hi everybody! She got fur all over me. Hi everyone, it's me, Sonia, back again. Today's video is actually going to be the first video about my own personal life and experiences with diabetes, and today is chapter 2, pre-diagnosis DKA. I'm a little bit nervous about doing this video because what happened 2 years ago, and so I don't know if I remember everything perfectly, and it's going to be a little bit choppy because it happened over a month-long period. However, I think this is a really important video actually, because if you don't know the symptoms of type 1 diabetes, which no one really does until they do research on it, then you could have these symptoms and not know what's going on with your body, be like me and just kind of ignore it for a while, only to find out that you are very unhealthy. So I got diagnosed on March 3rd of 2016, which actually yesterday was my 2-year anniversary. I remember just feeling like anyone would feel with a flu, just not feeling good. And I didn't really think much of it other than, oh, like, this sucks that I'm missing school and that I don't feel good. But it wasn't anything that out of the ordinary. It was just a flu. Like, everybody gets flus. So in January of 2016, I actually started getting flu-like symptoms that developed into a full-on flu. And if you saw my last video, I explained that flus and viral infections can actually be the trigger to cause the type 1 diabetes in the body to activate itself. So it started to get better, and I went back to school, and I felt like I was doing better until I started realizing that I still wasn't feeling good, and I eventually got way worse. Eventually I started realizing that other things were kind of odd, and I brought up with my mom that I wasn't feeling good, and she said the same thing. It's probably just, you're not over the flu yet completely. You're still not feeling great from the flu. Now we're going to get into some of the more characteristics of diabetes type 1 and going into a disease known as DKA, or diabetic ketone acidosis, which I'm planning to do a full video on, but essentially it is that you are not getting any insulin in the body, or you're getting very little insulin in the body, and because of that your pancreas and your body and metabolism are looking for other sources of food in your body because you're essentially starving. And when it does that, it takes away muscle and fat. You're essentially starving and your body's trying to eat itself to stay alive, but in doing that, you're not really healthy at all, obviously. And so if you hear about diabetics getting extremely sick for long amounts of time, or even sadly dying, it is usually due to diabetic ketone acidosis. One of the first things that I realized started happening, other than the extreme fatigue, sleeping for 12 plus hours a day, just completely uninterested in any activities, and the just general nausea, was actually an extreme need for carb-filled foods that I didn't usually like. I have had eating disorders since I was in middle school, and I'm planning to go more into them in the future, but part of those eating disorders include binge eating, which is not just eating a large amount of food in a short amount of time. It is essentially when you feel like you cannot stop eating, whether or not you want to. When I first started having these binges, I assumed that it was more of a relapse from, my past eating disorders, and I hadn't really gotten over them at that time, so I thought maybe I was just getting worse, and I didn't really think that much of it. I thought that I was really struggling with it, But at the same time, I realized that my body was starting to get skinnier throughout the process, and I was really confused. When I say carb-filled foods I wouldn't usually eat, I mean that my body was craving carbs like nobody's business. I am not a big juice or smoothie or lemonade or just usually my only drink that I prefer is water and then sometimes tea. For the most part, when I started craving foods, it was normal things that I would usually binge on, like bagels, pastries, ice cream, things like that. But I started to realize that it had morphed into more so carb-filled drinks. And I remember just thinking that that was really odd and that I wasn't sure why I was craving them. But I didn't think like a huge amount of it. I just thought it was weird that all of a sudden I wanted all these foods that I hadn't really liked for a long time. The next thing that kind of started to happen was that I was just thirsty all the time. Like, not just, oh, I really could use some water, I could use a drink right now, but honestly, like, I hadn't drinking water in like a week type of thirst. Like, I felt so dehydrated. I can't even explain it because I had never felt that kind of thirst before I was diabetic. I brought this up with my mom, but I was a dancer in high school. I danced every single day, hours a day, and so both me and her figured that the food was related to the fact I was exercising so much and due to the past eating disorders, and that the water was again because I was exercising so much and so my body needed more water. I will tell you right now that the amount of water I was drinking was way more than what you might be thinking. I was filling up my water bottle constantly. I would get up in the middle of the night to just go and get water, and that was not like a big characteristic for me before. It would happen 2 to 3 times a night, and no matter how much water I drank, I didn't feel like any better. My lips had gone super chapped, and just everything about me looked so dehydrated, and no matter how much water I drank, it wouldn't get any better. Along with that, the next symptom that really started to affect me was that I had to go bathroom all the time. At first I didn't really think about this because I was drinking so much water. I just figured, okay, I obviously have to go to the bathroom more because I'm drinking more water. But then I started having to go to the bathroom 2 to 3 times a night. Like, it would severely affect my sleep because I would wake up and just have the biggest need to go to the bathroom 2 to 3 times a night, which I had never had that before. And so I was really confused, like extremely confused at this point of why I would wake up to go to the bathroom, need to fill up my water bottle, drink like an entire water bottle before I went back to bed, and then wake up again. And it was not a fun process. So after both of these symptoms started occurring, I kept my mom pretty in the loop, and I don't want you guys to think that my mom is like a bad person or that she should have taken me in. I get sick a lot, and so she kind of figured that it was just that I was, you know, sick with like something viral and that I was getting over it, and that all the other things were related to like me dancing every day or eating disorders. And you can't blame her for that. If you don't know the symptoms of type 1 diabetes offhand, then they can seem like very average things, or you can find excuses for them, and nobody's walking around thinking, oh yeah, my daughter has type 1 diabetes. However, then I started randomly losing vision, which was extremely scary to me because I have always had 20/20 vision, and all of a sudden I started seeing things extremely blurry. I remember bringing this up with several people, one of them being one of my teachers that I was actually very close with, and I was like, I'm very confused because I've looked it up and everything says that it shouldn't happen this fast for you to lose your vision, or that it's extremely uncommon, or that it needs some type of trigger for you to start losing your vision. And I didn't really have any of that, and so I was just confused, and this teacher basically was like, oh, that is really, really weird, but maybe you're having vertigo. And I looked into what vertigo was, and it didn't seem extremely scary. Basically, she thought I was having little symptoms of vertigo, and she had had it before, so she said it sounded similar, and I hadn't brought up the other symptoms with her, so I kind of just chucked it up to it being that, and I brought it up with my mom, and we were kind of like, okay, we'll look into this soon. Kind of pushed it back because, like I said, I was a dancer who danced every day, and I was in 4 AP classes my junior year, so I was very busy. So around this time, some big events in my life started happening, and one of them was that we had the Winterfest dance for my school, which was basically a pretty casual dance. It's not like homecoming or anything like that. It's very, very casual, and I went with my dance team. One of the reasons I knew for me that this is weird is that I love school dances. I love dancing. I'm a dancer. I love music and just having a good time, and it's really hard to actually get me off a dance floor once I'm on it. I will dance until I literally can't anymore. And all of a sudden I had to go and get water like every 2 minutes. I could not make myself stop getting water, and people were thinking it was weird. My dance friends were all like just very confused as to why I needed so much water so often, and I just kept being like, I don't know, I just feel extremely fatigued. I feel like I can't breathe. I remember telling one of my very close friends who kept going out with me to get water that I felt like my mouth was sticking together and that my throat was sticking together to the point where I could not breathe. And that's obviously extremely scary. So when I say that I'm extremely thirsty, I mean that my mouth literally stuck together like glue, and that it interfered with my breathing. The next big thing that happened was actually the day after, I believe, and it was the dance company show for my high school that I was in every dance. I will say it was actually probably one of my favorite years of dance, and I was really pumped up about the show, but I think I was mostly running on adrenaline for the show, and afterwards I just felt not good at all. The other thing that kind of comes into play around this time is that I had a boy ask for my number in one of my classes who I had never talked to. I had thought that he was super cute, but I was like, he'd never be interested in me. Didn't really think much into it. And then he actually came up after class one day and asked for my number. And I had never had someone do that before. I never had a boyfriend before or anyone interested in me. And so it was kind of a big deal to me. And he so happened to be on the drum line that performs at the dance company shows, and so I was pretty much trying to see him the entire time and just really excited about the fact that there was this boy that was interested in me. And so that also plays into the whole adrenaline and just being excited. Now, the next big thing actually does involve this boy. For those of you that know me, you know who I'm talking about. This is actually my current boyfriend. We just celebrated 23 months together. Essentially, he actually ended up asking me on a date. He claims it wasn't a date, but we went to the movies alone, the two of us, and we both knew that we liked each other. But it wasn't an official date. We just went to the movies and saw the movie Gods of Egypt. It was right around February, end of February. It was the last couple days of February. And I had debated on even going, which was like a big deal because I was so excited, like beyond excited to go to this movie with this cute boy that was super interested in me. And like hours before, I was like, I don't even know if I can do this. I feel so sick. I don't think that I'm gonna be able to do this, Mom. I feel like I'm gonna puke. Like, my breath absolutely stinks. Oh, that's like one of the major things about diabetic ketoacidosis, and one of the ways that I know that I was extremely sick at that point was actually that I had the ketone breath, is kind of what it's known as. It comes from ketones, which I'll go into what that is at a different time. but it is the worst breath ever. Like, it is so disgusting smelling. It almost smells metallic-y and almost like alcohol, I guess. That's what my mom had always said, and she was really confused why my breath smelled so bad all the time. And that was another big part of me getting extremely sick, was that all of a sudden I had this taste in my mouth that I couldn't get rid of, and the only time I could get rid of it was while I was actually drinking one of those carb-filled foods, but beyond that, it would just always be there, and I tried so hard to get rid of it. To this day, I think that was one of the worst parts, honestly, and I really can't explain it to anyone that hasn't experienced it. So,
hey guys, I'm so sorry, but between these two clips, the video cut out and I didn't realize it. So to sum up what I was talking about, I ended up going on the date, and afterwards I went to my cousin's rugby match, and I ended up laying on the bleachers and just essentially begging my mom to go home, even though it was something I was looking forward to. My dad ended up having to come and pick me up, and later that night I was in so much pain, and like, I think it was like 2 a.m. I went and I woke up my parents crying, just talking about how I felt so sick and was in so much pain and I couldn't sleep. And we ended up going to a doctor's office that late at night. I don't really know the situation for the doctor's office. I was not in the right place to really comprehend anything, but that's basically what I talked about in between these clips.
So when I went to this doctor's office, they basically did the normal test that they would do for a checkup or for, I guess, the certain symptoms I was having. They ended up doing a strep test and found that I did indeed also have strep. Of course, at that time, they only knew that I had strep. They gave me some antibiotics and sent me on my merry way. I started taking these antibiotics, and I had had strep many times in the past, and I was not getting any better. It had been 3 days, and at that point you're definitely supposed to be on an upward trend and making your way to feeling better, and I was not. I was getting way worse, if that's possible. I was puking all the time. I was sleeping most of the day. I could barely talk, like could not talk correctly, and couldn't breathe. I couldn't even walk like 5 feet without feeling just completely exhausted and out of breath. So at that point, my mom took me to our normal healthcare provider, and when I got there, they decided to do a urine test. I don't remember super clearly, but I was in this doctor's office. I was sitting on like the chair for the patient, you know what I'm talking about, and my mom was sitting on one of the normal chairs, and I had just done this urine test. I felt super sick. I had to have a wheelchair to bring me into the doctor's office, super fatigued, basically extremely tired because it was a pretty early appointment, and on top of that, I was tired all the time at this point. And I remember just not being able to think. And I can't explain that very well, but like, I had a vague sense of what was going on around me, but I couldn't really comprehend anything. Everything was kind of just very difficult to actually like think about things. I remember that the nurse kept asking me questions, and I tried to answer, but my voice just like wasn't working. Everything was coming out super mumbled, and I had to think for a good few seconds before I could even come up with like a simple answer to her questions. I should mention that I also had a strep test done that day, and they found that the strep was negative. I think that may have actually been why they decided to do the urine test, but like I said, I'm not super clear on that day. I do remember that when she brought the test in, she basically said, "We've got the test results. You're going to need to go to the hospital immediately. Do you need an ambulance?" At that point, I have no idea what's going on, and she didn't really tell me what was happening. So of course I start freaking out. I remember that I started crying, but I wasn't exactly sure why I was crying. I just knew that what was happening was bad, but I didn't know really what was happening. It's very very weird to explain that because to this day I don't really understand where I was at that moment, and I've never had that feeling since then. But I just remember crying because I knew something bad was going on and that I was scared, but not really understanding what was happening. After that, the nurse did say that they found ketones and sugar in my urine, and that it was highly likely that I had type 1 diabetes. I didn't even really know what diabetes was or what type 1 was at all, and so I just knew that something was happening that was not good. My mom ended up saying that she would bring me straight to the hospital and that we did not need an ambulance. This is pretty much where I want to stop this story. I'm hoping to make my next video actually on the hospital visit. It will probably be quite a bit shorter because it was pretty much a blur and it was only a couple days, whereas this is 1 to 2 months. I do want to say that in the car ride to the hospital, my mom had asked me not to call anyone or talk to anyone about what was happening at that moment because it wasn't a for sure diagnosis, but she did allow me to call one of my best friends, and I just remember being on the phone with my best friend and saying, they think I've got diabetes, I don't know what's going on, I'm so confused, I'm so scared, and just bawling my eyes out, probably not even audibly to her. And I remember telling my mom that I was scared that it was something I had done, that perhaps it was because of the binge eating problems that I'd had and that I had done this to myself. Again, I didn't know anything about type 1 diabetes, and so I was so scared that it was something that I had caused or put on myself. Spoiler alert, it was not. I could not have done anything to prevent it. It was going to happen no matter what, but I remember just having the most sickening feeling that I had done this to myself. Looking back on it, it's very difficult to remember that because up until that point, everything about my life had seemed pretty normal. Obviously, I'd had troubles with other things, but this was something that just came out of the blue that I was not prepared for at all. And it's just scary to go into the hospital with them saying you're going to have this disease for the rest of your life and not even knowing really what that meant or what it entailed. So, sorry if that got a little emotional at the end. Just some of the memories, I guess, brought back some emotions with them. I'm gonna admit that I'm a very paranoid person. I always think that I have some kind of medical problem going on, even if I don't. However, if you are having symptoms that just seem off, or if you just don't feel right, or something just feels weird, go to a doctor, go get some help. Make sure you don't play it off for so long that it ends up becoming more serious than it needed to be. I was so deep in DKA that if I had waited even a few more days, I likely would have been in a coma and I likely would have died. And obviously that would be just a horrible, horrible outcome to something that I could have gotten diagnosed with a month before. Of course, in the end, we ended up making it in time. Barely, but we did, and I'm so grateful for that. That is my pre-diagnosis DKA story. Hope you guys all have a great day. I hope you have better weather than we are having where I'm at. It is all snowy, and I'm just so ready for spring, considering that I'm on spring break and it's just all snow right now. But I hope that you guys are having a good, sunny, happy day, and I guess I'll see you next time.